Just say that.
Uh, Good afternoon all. We'll wait for another 2-3 minutes and then we'll start. Thank you. Good afternoon, panelists, participants, one and all present here. Though we are practicing social spacing due to the ongoing pandemic, I firmly believe we can still bond and learn from each other. With this note, I welcome everyone to the second panel discussion titled Dilemmas in Development. There is a very interesting article in EPW written by Mr. Kameshwar Chaudhary in the year 2000 titled Development Dilemma, Resettlement of Gir Malharis. His article states, the growth-led paradigm of development has resulted in global ecological imbalance, increased inter and intra-country socio-economic inequalities, displacement, marginalization and cultural uprooting of a large number of native people. The ecology-centered model emerged in answer and emphasized the creation of more national parks and sanctuaries. Ironically, this also led to the displacement of a large number of native people and their further marginalization and sufferings in social, economic, and cultural terms. I believe development is a holistic term that aims to improve the standard of sustenance of not just we humans, but every resources that we see around us. But dilemma arises due to the difference among our views and perspectives guiding the concept of development. Without any further ado, I'd like to introduce Dr. Anand Venkatesh as the panel chair. Dr. Anand Venkatesh is a professor of economics and statistics at IRMA since 2014. He is a PhD from University of Mumbai. He is a Fulbright Fellow from the University of Connecticut, USA. He also has done a postdoctoral study at the University of Pretoria, South Africa. His research interests are productivity and efficiency analysis, transportation economics, rural access, and mobility, as well as community impact assessment. He has also been the principal investigator in a study involving the measurement of women's economic empowerment. I hand over the session to Dr. Anand, who would then introduce our eminent panelists of the day to all of us. Thank you. Over to you, Anand, sir.
Thanks a lot. Yeah, it's a matter of great honor, joy, and pride for IRMA to have this elite three-member panel to talk to us, to enlighten us on the theme, the dilemmas of development. I first take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Srijit Mishra. Dr. Srijit Mishra Professor of IGIDR and former director of NCDS, he researches and teaches on development related issues that intertwine between social philosophy, analytical measurement, and applied development. He has been instrumental in spearheading the Odisha Millets Mission that brought together the government, civil society, and academia for pro people action research initiative that works in four verticals, which are production, processing, marketing, and consumption. His work on Cyclone Fani as part of a multidisciplinary team involving the government of Odisha and many multilateral agencies dealt with macroeconomic and human impact that has important methodological and policy implications. His work on farmer suicides in Maharashtra has led to setting up of the Vasantrao Nayak Shetkari Swavalamban Mission and other policy outcomes, including deliberations leading to debt waiver. Some of his publications are on agrarian issues, measurement of development indicators, and poverty, among others. He has been a guest scholar at Meiji University, Japan during June 2016, ICCR chair visiting professor at the National Chengchi University, Taipei, Taiwan during spring semester 2015, and Subir Chaudhary Fellow on Quality and Economics, London School of Economics and Political Science, spring 2014. His MPhil PhD on agrarian economies were carried out at the Center for Development Studies, Trivandrum, which was awarded by JNU, Delhi. Over to you, Professor Mishra. I request all our panelists, I'll say this at the beginning, to keep their talk to about 20 minutes or so, so that we'll have some time for interaction with the rest of us. With this, I hand over to Professor Mishra.
Thank you, Professor Venkatesh. That's really kind of you for the introduction. And it's nice that I could listen to Professor Bhaduri earlier in the day. And I think one of the concerns or his main proposition that he was trying to tell us is this disconnect between the growth and distribution. And it's quite possible that while growth may not happen as we are witnessing now, but at the same time, there could be some section of the population for whose income would increase and large section of the population whose income would decrease. So inequality would increase. So I think these are some of our concerns which have bothered us. How do we address these concerns? I understand IRMA based coming out of Gujarat has somewhere also brought in principles of Gandhiji and maybe Ambedkar and myself try to bring both together while trying to understand Rawls, who talks about justice, one of the prominent philosophers of the previous century. And keeping this in the background, as Professor Venkatesh has made my work simpler by saying about my work on Maharashtra Shetkari, the farmer suicides there. And somewhere this whole initiative in Odisha Millets Mission also goes back to my work in Maharashtra. So this farmer suicides, working with them, working with farmer families was emotionally quite draining on me and perhaps any researcher who would work on such a topic. So because once you go to a household, you would find either a widow with young children or old parents being there. So how would a researcher combine on the one hand emotions, on the other hand yet try to be objective? When we do social science research, we know we were somewhere between objectivity and subjectivity. But so that is one of the first challenges that I based there, that how we should be very careful, be very cautious to work on evidence-based facts and then put it forth before the state and authorities so that some action or some policy decisions could take place. So that was one of my first interventions where substantive policy decisions were taken by the government. But and it did borrow from what I took from the field evidence, and then the government in the Maharashtra, as well as there were offshoots from it, which took to Government of India also taking decisions at various stages. But there was a friendly academic critique around this time who mentioned that, okay, fine, I mean, you did a study which led to policy outcomes, but do you think the farmer has really benefited? I mean, all of us, those who have been following up rural India and agriculture and farm and farmers, so try to understand that actually nothing much is happening. When you go back to what Professor Bhaduri has been telling us in the earlier in the day, in the afternoon when he was speaking, that growth might be happening, but there are certain sections and definitely farmers, agriculture workers, laborers, and others, as he pointed out, have not been the one who have benefited much, or at times have even lost out, like in the current pandemic, while some people might have benefited. So this friendly academic critique led me to think that, okay, is it an academic work just to do a piece of study and research, even if one engages with the ground level and passes it to the government and government does, is it that much, or something more needs to be done? And that is that point of time that I happened to move somewhere after that. This Maharashtra study has been more than 15 years now, 2006 to 2020. And today I still find similar kind of problems in Maharashtra, in rural India, in large parts of the other parts of the country. And around 2015, when I moved to Bhubaneswar, somehow there was some convergence of stars, and there was some because of this academic critique, I started interacting with civil society groups across the country. Revitalizing Rainford Agriculture Network is one, and ASHA, Alliance for Sustainable and Holistic Agriculture, is another. Not that I have been active with them, but then I was trying to interact with them, trying to know, understand what they are trying to do. So these group got in touch with me. They said that something on millets need to be done, and it was also happened that I took the. I was not sure what could be done, but I took it to some senior government officials then, and it seemed that they were also the persons involved there was perhaps involved, perhaps interested that something need to be done, out to be done. So, and we started a consultation meeting. So this senior official said that he would come, and he also made it a point that other officials of the government, other department, line departments of the government come. He had given time for about half an hour, but ended up staying for half a day, and indicated that we should submit a proposal, which we did again with the help of some civil society groups, this group's friends that I was referring to. And lo and behold, in 2016 budget of government of Odisha, they announced that they will start with a millets mission. And then that led to another 1 year of work when actual budget was apportioned. So this whole journey in the last 3-4 years, Odisha Millets Mission is now known to many people in development circles. And this whole journey of the last 3-4 years has been actually a tug of war between how top down and bottom up or needs to be brought together. In fact, from the very beginning, it has been like that. When we started the work, civil society groups, farmers, academicians from across the country came. They gave their ideas, their suggestions. Government officials were also there from day one, but each had their questions, each had their queries, questions, and many times what happens that when we come together, we try to look at the other party as something who is not trying to take our story forward. That okay, or whenever. So here, I think academia had a very strong role, which is not conventional to academicians. I mean, we generally collect data, do research, publish papers. That is how we are evaluated. But in this case, we had to get involved in an action research where policy could work on a daily basis. Certain policy decisions could work on daily or much more regular basis. So what I need to bring forth is that policy actions, while top down, is essential and necessary, because if your government, those who are there in the decision making authorities, whether they are the executive authorities elected or selected, so whoever there at the top, they ought to take that decision. We cannot take it away from them, whether you're prime minister or chief minister or chief secretary cabinet, whoever is there in that executive decision making authority, they obviously have a very important role to play. At the same time, when we interact with civil society groups, and Anand also has its own way of working with small and marginal farmers. I think your chairman was referring to that today in Professor Madhuri's talk. So how do we bring in evidences or bottom-up understanding? So I'll give a couple of examples. Like initially when it took us 1.5 years to get the Odisha Millets Mission running, and when the guidelines was ready, we had our first meeting in one of the this aspirational districts. They became aspirational districts later, but it was one of them in Koraput, and we had this meeting. And after the meeting, inception meeting of the guidelines were more or less ready. Inception meeting, one official of the agriculture department comes and says that what you are thinking is very good. It's a very good program, but it is not going to uh, be effective. It's not start. I mean, before it starts only it will fizzle out. I said, why it is so? In the policy guidelines, we had kept a note that the PD Atma, that the governing body of Atma, has to decide who will be the facilitating officer. One unique structure of Odisha Millets Mission is that we have the government, we have the civil society and academia, and each block, a civil society is chosen as a facilitating agency. So it was this official question that your selection of facilitating agency itself will not happen, because you have put the governing board of ATMA at the decision making body. That should be so? He said that, see, the governing body meets every quarter, but actually it may not be every quarter. It could be 6 months, or it could be different. And even if it meets every quarter, they will have a lot of agenda, and your agenda will actually be pushed out, and all would be deferred. The actual language that would be used in the meeting. So you would be lucky that in 1 or 2 places perhaps FA is selected, but in many places it won't get selected, because what you are coming up with a new design, it's an out of the box thinking. So then he said, then we asked what should be done. He said, what you should do, what you should suggest is make the PD Atma the deciding factor under the collector, and governing board of Atma should be the ratifying body. So I just asked him, why didn't you
Uh, Professor Srijit, hello, sir. Sir, your screen got freezed.
all of them immediately agreed, said yes, this problem is likely to be there. So is there a problem? Am I audible?
Now it is fine. Now it is fine. Now it is fine. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, just we missed the last 2 sentences.
Okay. So no, what I was telling is that he gave a suggestion of how to go about it. And when I go back to the senior officials, they said, yes, no, that is a good suggestion and we should do it. So what I'm saying, that the hierarchical structure, the policy making or the government structure by design is such that decisions should go down so that implementation is effective. Now it has a logic behind it, but it is because of this top-down structure, certain feedback loops may be absent. So it was this feedback loop which is required, like what is bottom up, whatever evidence is coming up on a daily basis or a monthly basis or an annual basis, how do we take it back? Now, when officials were friendly with us and they knew us, so it was easy for us to have meetings with farmers, to have meeting with our FAs, to take feedback, or our program secretariat, whoever they are working in the field, they give us certain feedback and we go back and tell them, and then the government would take decisions. And it's not that the decision would happen overnight. It had its own procedures which may take days or months at times. So, but what I'm saying that the feedback loop was something very important. Then what I observe is that it is not only top down and bottom up. Certain kinds of policy decisions can also be individual specific. When people change at the top or bottom or even at the lower field level, so then also there can be problem. Even a village extension worker changes, you need to explain, convince, because they have understood agriculture extension in one particular way. Now, if you're trying to say that, no, we need to begin science and we need to bring in tradition. See, science also has a tradition. It is not that science and tradition are something different. And tradition is also based on doing things again and again and trying to find out what are the patterns and what works, what doesn't work. Farmer also does that. And they have done it for thousands of years, and then they see what is effective. And then we try to bring in science and tradition together. But then it needs explaining, even at the very low level, it needs explaining, at senior level, it needs explaining. The point I'm trying to bring in at the senior level, when it needs explaining, that the new officer comes in, they will say, okay, government is giving money, civil society is helping us, we have already selected this facilitating agency. Now I'm telling a point where facilitating agency have been selected and already work has been done. So what is your role as an academia? Why should you be there? Why should we be giving you money? It's then that dawned on us that, okay, whatever kinds of information we is providing to senior officials for policy decisions, everything may not be documented. There may be small messages in a WhatsApp or in verbally. So then that is where we started doing something called a policy brief, 1 pager, 2 pager to 4 pager. So basically identifying the problems and trying to give some solutions. So that means even if there is a change, there is some documentation available. I'm quite, of course, everything cannot be documented when you're working on a real-time action basis, particularly when funds are quite constrained and limited. But this is one way out where we try to bring in top-down and bottom-up concerns together. So I think I will have perhaps another 4 or 5 minutes to speak, Professor Anand.
You may continue, sir.
Okay, so another 4 or 5 minutes.
Take your time, sir. You can.
Okay, so in this, so this is a top-down and bottom-up dilemma. What I'll try to tell you certain kinds of what has happened in this Odisha Millets Mission. Some of you are aware, some of you may not be aware. So in this last 4 years, what like in the first year, what happened? We worked in. We were supposed to work in 30 blocks, but for various reasons, some FAs could not be selected. We started working in 27 blocks in the first year. So I'll tell you the process. Even when there is a lot of agreement at the top level, so see the policy decisions and implementation have various procedures. So even when at the very senior level official and perhaps the chief minister and all agreed, and it was passed in the budget or announced in the budget that such a thing should go, it took another 1.5 years for it to actually come down in paper and funding to be given to various players who will act. The districts, the NCDS as a nodal agency, and as the state secretariat, and so on and so forth. So, and the Directorate of Agriculture playing a nodal role in trying to bring these players together. Now the thing is, finally, I think we received the money, or we received a go-ahead sometime in middle of June. And those of you who are familiar, those of you who are familiar with agriculture in eastern part of the country, or even large part of the country, and in eastern part, mid-June is actually a crucial time. Our decisions on agriculture have already been taken. Sowing decisions for that year have already been taken. And we were quite skeptical whether this will actually go through or not. Luckily, because of our program secretariat people and other FA partners across the thing, our first year event was reasonably successful. Yields, I'll tell you the problem. While government did take its own feedback from the ground, or we provided feedback which were not academically sound, it took us another 2 years to actually provide it. So only last year that we came out with the data that yield has more than doubled after cautious calculations, and income for the farmer has more than tripled in the first year itself. But quite at the end of the first year, we had those data with us. We had those crop cutting experiments which we had shared, and as a result, people, when we started the program, people were very questioning why millets, why should you quit? And those who were pro millets, they started explaining when they were officials at a young officials in the district cadre, at the district level, how they were questioned by by farmers. Okay, so your son is going to eat wheat and rice. Why should my son be eating millets? Now, at the end of 1 year, we started getting phone calls. At each level, the government functionaries who are working and others, MLAs, they started calling us. Why is it that you have not included our block or our district in your scheme? So as a result, today, 4 years down the line, from 30 blocks, we are working the millet mission. I am not part of it anymore, but the Odisha Millets Mission is part of 76 blocks now. Initially, the funding started with Government of Odisha. Now, even the district mineral fund in some districts, at least 2 districts, is providing funding. the interventions of the program was not, when we started, we saw that there was another kind of a dilemma, let me say you, whenever we start an intervention, agriculture intervention, and Anand has actually worked it out quite beautifully in the dairy sector. So when farmer produces, then you don't know how to, so farmer doesn't have a market. On the other hand, now consumer in urban areas, in many other parts, they are quite conscious and they want to eat millets, but they are not getting at as a reasonable price. So we have a production side, we have a consumption side, and it is like a chicken egg problem. So we don't know where to sort it out. So how to sort it out? So to address these things, we thought actually any interventions like the Odisha Millet Mission should not only address production, should also have consumption. And production and consumption can only be combined together if you bring in processing and marketing. So these were the four verticals that one worked, and we did try to cover all these things, and they're progressing. There are of course a thousand problems in while trying to work with so many farmers. I think as of now, if I recall, current year there are about uh, perhaps 50,000 hectares and about nearly 1 lakh of farmers or somewhere close to that are already in the program in 4 years. Government of Odisha has started procurement of millets. They have started with ragi. I hope that they take it to other crops also. And in Swabhiman Anchal, which is part of Malkangiri, an aspirational district, another cutoff aspirational district, the last year, 2019 December. So there was the first time that any grain was procured in this region after in the last 70 plus years of independence. People came in mules, in boats. These are cutoff areas. They came and people came and tried to sell 5 kgs. If you are familiar with rice procurement or other procurement, which we try to bring into millets, so you have to get a token, you have to get yourself registered. Now here people in a cutoff area with enthusiasm are coming in 5 kgs, 10 kgs, the district immediately took an administration. No, we will take each and every person who comes with ragi. So procurement has been a very good boon. Not that all ragi produced in this area is procured. So it doesn't happen in paddy also across the country. Similarly, consumption, we had a lot of consumption campaigns in Bhubaneswar, in each district of awareness. Today, the Women and Child Health Department, they are trying to bring in, provide millets in some form in Anganwadis. So I think convergence is happening between departments, within departments. The whole thing is breaking up silos within academia, within civil society, within government, and between each of this. So all this is actually a flow of certain times decision has to be top down, certain times you have to be bottom up. So I think the structure is both ways. Whenever we have to take decisions, we cannot say that this is the way or that is the way. As I said, that top-down structures are necessary because the decision has to be taken by someone at the top. But similarly, bottom-up feedback loops are equally important, and without them, we might miss out very important parts. Similarly, dynamic, any policy decision has to be dynamic. It cannot be a one-shot kind of a thing. Okay, I took a decision, that is how it should be. There can be problems as we go. So we should have these feedback loops actually help for you to fine tune as you go. So that's I would say that yeah, these are very important dilemmas that we have, top down, bottom up, and they are inbuilt in each of this. Whether you refer to science, the thinking in science and academia, that we have come up with certain policy decisions. This should go down. I think we need to also respect the knowledge and understanding of the farmer there. They many a times actually have greater understanding of their situation than we have, and we need to learn from them. So I think this top-down, bottom-up should be there across each and every aspect of work that we do, whether it is policy, whether it's research, whether it is anything else. Like I think many of you who are there here, professors, would definitely agree with me that many times you get good insights from your students and scholars. And so of course, students would obviously praise some of their professors for getting insights. So it's a both way journey. And I think I have exceeded my time. I'll stop here. I'll get back if there are questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, sir. It was a really insightful talk, and I will sum it up later. It was a great learning experience for me. And
Thank you.
I now take the opportunity to introduce Dr. Balachandra Patil. Dr. Balachandra Patil is a PhD from Indian Institute of Science. He is a Chief Research Scientist of Management Studies at IISc Bangalore. He is a PhD from Indian Institute of Science. He is an energy, environment and sustainability expert. And he's ranked among top 10 management researchers in India. He's also ranked among top 2% of energy scientists in the world. That's remarkable. He has 33 years of experience as faculty at IISc and a visiting expert at Harvard University, UNDP Bangkok, AIT Bangkok, and IGIDR Mumbai. His research expertise includes energy and environmental economics and policy, sustainability transition, sustainability energy access, and techno-economic and financial feasibility analysis. He has investigated about 48 research and consultancy assignments for UNDP, European Commission, World Bank, SIDA, SANAI, RCUK, AIT, TERI, IGIDR, DST, and various ministries of the government, India, and private sector organizations. He has co-authored 6 books and published about 150 papers in international and national journal conferences and edited books. He has supervised 29 PhD scholars and has been conferred with the Distinguished Alumni Award of Manipal University in 2011. Sir, it's a great honor to introduce you, and over to you, sir, for your talk.
Thank you, Professor Anand. I think at the outset, I would also like to thank Professor Hippo and his colleagues for inviting me. I have prepared a presentation. I will try to share the screen. Let me see how it works. Can I do that?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. This is actually a presentation of kind of work in progress, not like a formal output of a research or something like that. It's a kind of a thought process which is evolving. And what I am targeting, the consumption, which is different from what Professor Srijit Mishra discussed. Consumption of all kinds. I think let me elaborate it in subsequent slides. And the point, what I was trying to make, because the title is a bit confusing, consumption, definitely, we know that it's a critical input to growth. I think during this pandemic, we have seen a reduction in consumption, how it contributed to, complete deceleration of growth in many countries in the world, India being the biggest sufferer. But I would like to argue that consumption, though necessary for growth, it has several detrimental effects on sustainable development. And I would also like to distinguish between what I call growth and development, in subsequent slides. Why this thought process was motivated in me, by looking at some of these key examples, mobility or travel. It has no more remained just for accessing employment, education, markets, recreation, what we call as fundamental needs of better living. Next is entertainment. It has no more remained as an engagement during spare and free time. Now that, I think, entertainment has become mainstay of our life. I think other day I was just discussing with someone, if entertainment goes out of our economic system, the global economy will come down by 50%. The third is mobile phones or cell phones. They have no more remained as a device for communication and accessing information. In other words, the consumption which goes beyond, that is what we call as a need or a demand, the kind of negative consequences of that. I think that we need to keep in mind. I would like to elaborate a bit, the aspect of consumption. I would like to define it as as follows. Consumption is an outcome of desires of mind that drives the global supply chain of production of goods and services by extracting finite natural resources. The significant aspect is consumption has cost but no revenue. Revenue, I mean, it is not exactly in terms of financial term. You can consider it as value or some income or some tangible benefit out of consuming something. I would argue that it has only a sense of accomplishment like happiness, satisfaction, etc. But for growth, it must be promoted. I don't think we have a choice. But to deliver that consumption, we have a complex, production system. It is multi-dimensional, multi-scale, multi-level, and it's a must for growth. And it has got both cost and revenue implication. Because of that, any growth goals requires these production functions to perform at its best. The last, input for production, the natural resources, has no cost because nature doesn't demand any money, but has significant revenue. And to promote growth, it must be exploited. I think that is the thought process what we are going through in almost all the economic deliberations. If one particular resource is finite, you look for other resource. If fossil fuels are problematic, look for renewables. I don't think there are any attempts at why we should consume so much. I think that is the kind of question I am trying to pose here. And just a couple of introduction, what exactly we mean by consumption. Typically, we include, intermediary consumption for production. We basically call them as inputs. The target is largely final consumption that serves human desire for basic needs, livelihood needs, lifestyles, or luxury needs. The levels make the implications more and more intensive and harmful. It includes both goods and services, could be devices, appliances, a car or a machine, or services. Entertainment, mobility, communication, games, dining, anything you can include. And when we look at drivers of consumption, as I said, the need for consumption happens in one's mind. The brain, or our behavior has a significant influence on that. And, when we move upwards from need to demand to greed, I think the implications are different. Basically I'm targeting the hierarchical, levels of these desires, which creates problems. These desires are typically influenced by environment, would be peers, observation, and other things. And typically these are grown uncontrollably because of surplus income and affordability. They are also driven by the need for esteem, status, and fashion. And typically, both government and private sector institutions promote this. More consumption is the better. You incentivize consumption, you subsidize both production and consumption. There are very formal organizations for marketing this consumption, advertising, why you need to replace, even though the product is working, the service is adequate, but still we want, just mobility in a normal car is inadequate. We need a luxurious car and a new car every maybe 2 years. There is obsolescence, natural or induced, and novelty is always demanded. I think together they kind of promote consumption. And to continue my discussion, I will briefly distinguish between what I meant by growth and development. Economic growth, typically you can categorize them into, it is measure of increase in volumes of goods and services, could be increase in GDP and GNP, or increase in per capita income. But it doesn't really bother what exactly we mean by increase in volume, who gains from that, how this is being achieved, where it happens, rural, urban, developed, developing, poor, and how many people gain out of this, and how much is enough or how much is required. But on the other hand, development, as Professor Srijit Mishra explained, it aims at equitable distribution of wealth and income, begins with satisfaction of basic human needs, starting with meeting the needs of the neediest, expected to provide equal opportunities, expected to provide stability, equity, affordability, accessibility, and quality. Looking at these, I think one could come out with a conclusion that these two things are distinct. Though, we prefer to use these two terms interchangeably, but I personally feel that, those two are different. And now, having explained development, I think the next step becomes important is what exactly is sustainable development. So what I have tried to explain here is, it is all those activities which I have listed under development need to be passed through these filters of economic feasibility, social acceptability, environmental soundness. When I say economic feasibility, I am not aiming at profitability. Typical corporate definition of sustainability, you see, they have, triple bottom line, profit, people, and planet. That meaning is slightly different from what I'm trying to convey here. And social acceptability with dignity, given the requirement of equity and respectability in mind. Then environmental soundness. Every action needs to be compliant with the environmental requirement. And as usual, conserving resources is an important aspect. And these are applicable to all transactions related to resource use, production, consumption, and technologies. I don't think sustainable development can ignore these four filters while, creating those transactions. And given the importance of consumption for growth, at least I personally feel there is a complete disregard for sustainable development. With the growth taking the priority, every stakeholder feels that at any cost we should achieve growth by disregarding sustainable development, whatever the way I have discussed here. Some of the important examples, I have tried to elaborate here. What I call them as consumption challenges, those have remained unaddressed. The list can be long, but I have basically picked up four which typically, intrigues me. Now, the first one is unbridled increase in urban lifestyle consumption. One can give several examples, in terms of, as I said, your food consumption. One possible distinction could be family dining versus five-star dining. Even though you eat food, but the kind of environment you create, and the overall cost of providing the dining becomes extremely high. And action for growth is increased production, because to support that consumption. And what are the typical outcomes? Municipal solid waste, wastewater. And how do you solve that? You have big programs for waste management, waste treatment. Even though we do that inefficiently, waste to energy. But I don't think there are any attempts at solving or attempting to solve the basic problem. Why people need to consume so much? The second example is increasing demand for mobility and travel. I don't think we ask questions, why people have become so restless, why they need to be, always mobile. Anyway, this pandemic has, influenced everyone to take more rest. I think the impact also we could see in terms of reduced pollution, reduced traffic, reduced accidents. But again, the action for growth typically promoted by every stakeholders is increase production of vehicles, widen road, build new roads, bridges, metro. Outcome, as I said already, pollution, traffic. And the solution is, as I said, road widening. If that doesn't work, you go for alternate transport system. If energy is a problem, look for biofuels, EVs, all those things. Again, we are not asking the fundamental question of why so much. You go to electronic goods, again, the same problem. You create so much of waste, then you address the problem through waste management. And I think interestingly, I think every one of us, we observe and know that I think the electronic goods is the only segment which gets loan at zero interest. I don't think there is any zero interest loan for any priority lending or that meets the farmer's requirement or the requirement of the poor. I think you can go on, stating such examples where the problem lies somewhere and the solutions we look for is something, completely disconnected. So I am trying to address here. We never address the problem of consumption. And one or the other way, all the stakeholders, those could be part of the government or private sector or individuals like us. We always look for technological alternatives, thinking that energy efficiency reduces, produce something so that consumption will remain same or it will grow, but we need to do it efficiently, or look for alternate fuels. When petrol and diesel becomes unacceptable because of environmental requirement, you look for other things, ethanol, bioethanol or something like that, or look for modern technologies or renewables, and enhance production of goods and services somehow to promote that. And always we look at end of pipe solutions, waste management, pollution mitigation, not, as I said earlier, attack the problem at its root. And my argument, again, I am not elaborating, since it's a thought process, I want to pose this problem for all the young researchers. And I also want to bring some confidence among them that solving such problems also can bring in PhD degrees. I have guided 2 PhD students who basically looked at mobility as a consumption, item of consumption and electronic goods. It's a very interesting research problem, looking the whole problem in a different perspective. When you can promote consumption, I think it should be equally easy to either moderate or reduce consumption using similar kind of mechanisms, like you incentivize or disincentivize certain kind of consumption. You create regulations. I think there are several examples. I don't think I need to elaborate on that. I think most of these aspects are we are aware of. Look for alternatives. It is not always necessary to be physically mobile. There are other ways of meeting your requirements. As I said, promotions, marketing, advertisements can be used to address this consumption challenge. Now, why I get kind of disturbed with this growth in unbridled consumption of what I call not exactly lifestyle. It is not absolutely essential, but kind of induced by either the producers of those goods and services or the peers around us. And from a larger sense, I think it has significant implications. I am going to show you a set of numbers, and I will not discuss that. And if you look at these numbers, you feel what kind of nation we have created and what kind of economy we have kind of produced. I would prefer to call Indian economy as unique, unstable, and unequal. You can read those numbers and make your own interpretations. And I feel, as the last point, India's sustainable future requires considering the needs of all, their consumption requirements, and when we reorient the whole production system to meet those needs, I think we would have a more sustainable economy or maybe sustainable nation. I think I will end with this slide and come back, if there are any questions. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks a lot, sir.
You.
It was a very thought-provoking talk. Made me at least think about what I possibly may be doing. The final, last but not the least, I would like to introduce Dr. Bejoy Thomas. Dr. Bejoy Thomas is an associate professor in Humanities and Social Sciences at Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, IISER, Pune. Originally trained in economics, he holds a PhD in development studies from Tilburg University, Netherlands. He was a faculty member at IISc Bangalore and had held various visiting positions at University of Waterloo, Canada and the University of British Columbia, Canada. His research covers issues of environment and development, specifically water resource management and livelihoods. Before I hand it over to Dr. Bejoy, I would request that after this we'll have a small discussion, and if you have some questions, it would be nice if you could put it in the chat box so that our anchor could read it out, so that we could expedite it later. We could have more questions. So over to you, Dr. Thomas.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Anand. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Yeah, so it's good that my talk is coming after Professor Mishra's and also Professor Patel's talk. So in fact, I also have a PPT to present. So in my talk, I'll be dealing with empirical material from the ground and also from the national level, just like what Professor Mishra tried to do in the initial talk. And then I will also have some conceptual pointers like what Professor Patel mentioned to us in the last talk. So if I may just start my PPT, I hope I'll be able to.
Have I stopped sharing my screen?
No, I think you will have to stop it and then I can.
Let me see. Yeah, just 1 minute. But I don't know.
Go ahead and share it, sir.
Yeah, I think I am sharing it now.
Yeah.
So since we are talking about dilemmas in development, so the dilemma which I am going to present is mostly normative. So I'm going to start with some empirical material, some broadly empirical material, but then I will be trying to put forward some normative challenges or dilemmas which I have faced in my own research and also action on the ground in the last few years, and also something which we have witnessed in the recent times in the wake of COVID. So I would broadly put the challenges as one of equity and sustainability, and the starting point from where I would begin my talk would be to state that normative positions, just like what Dr. Patil also mentioned in the previous talk. So normative positions matter in development and also the way we view things and also the way policies are made. So I think the point which I'm trying to make is that the kind of approach that we look at for development problems and also the way we view it philosophically and also the lens that we try to apply it during our research and also in engagement with the policymakers and communities. So that really affects the way we actually think about development and then work towards action. So the dilemma which I'm going to present are based on two cases. So one, for several years, I've been involved with engineers and environmental scientists in looking at the water resource management problem around Bangalore city. So this was a huge project which involved several people, right from communities in several villages to policymakers at the government level. So we had researchers, we had field personnel, we had numerous consultations with people, so which involved not just social interaction, but also had hydrological, environmental science and other components involved in it. So I'm not going into the details of the project as such and the work that we did as such, the initiative that we did. But then the challenge which the effort or the experience there for me was this dilemma of how to have the the food security on the one hand and also water sustainability on the other. So this also has implications for actual policy making and what we do currently in terms of the 2030 goals. So the challenge which I'm going to present first will be on the progress towards SDG 2, which is about hunger, and also SDG 6, which is about water management, also or water sustainability. The second is more related to the previous talk. So I'll be talking about inequality and unsustainable consumption based on some quick work that we did after COVID, based on some broad data that was available. And also try to challenge, because I come from a sustainability and equity perspective in my own way of looking at development and the setting. But then when I take an environmentalist stand, what happened after COVID might pose some normative challenge for me. So that is what I would be looking at after the first part. So that specifically speaks to SDG 10, which is about intra and inter-country inequality, and also SDG 12, which has to do with consumption and sustainable consumption. So the first case is with regards to water management in peri-urban Bangalore. So I'll just present a few figures from the field work, which involved several years. So when we look at domestic water consumption in the region where we work, so which is peri-urban Bangalore, the current liters per capita per day requirements across different social groups are well above the required norms which are prescribed by the government. So generally, when as researchers we go into the field, we have what we encounter there is that water access is inequitable. You have the caste and the class dimensions embedded in social settings. There is inequity that we could see. But in our work, so this is the rough, the broad picture that I could present. So if you look at marginalized and non-marginalized communities, which we broadly defined and collected data from. So this from a survey which was covering 15 villages, which was representative of the 1,000 villages or so, which were in the sub-basin that we studied. So both the set of households, marginalized as well as non-marginalized. So irrespective of whether you consider only domestic consumption or domestic and livestock consumption, we're well above the LPCD norms which are prescribed by the government. So what is the problem there? So there is no inequity as such, at least from the broad figures. So there might be several clusters which might be facing water scarcity. But then if you look at this particular figure, you wouldn't actually see water scarcity or problem in water access as such, irrespective of which community or which class you belong to. But then the challenge here is that where is this? So if you look at it from the perspective of meeting SDG 6 goals, you could easily dismiss this as being sufficient and equitable. So there is no problem there as such. But then where is this water coming from? So in fact, the very problem which led us to look at this particular landscape in detail was that this was a region which had a river and a reservoir which used to supply water to Bangalore, which has eventually gone dry in the last 20 years. So all of this water which the domestic sector is provided with is coming from groundwater. So this is not a very startling finding for many people who work on agriculture and agrarian issues, because India's agriculture is heavily dependent on groundwater. But look at this figure from this peri-urban setting in Bangalore, which we collected. This is the Arkavati sub-basin, basically. From 1980s onwards, you could see an increasing trend of borewells getting drilled and even more borewells getting failed. So there is a competitive drilling and failing of borewells. So based on our own estimates, 77% of the total borewells in the area which we studied have failed. So here is a challenge where you have adequate and equitable access, but then this is definitely not sustainable. So this is another startling finding from the years of work. The mean depth of borewell and also the depth at which water was sited has been steadily increasing. So which was, if it was around 120, 150 in the early 80s, so now you have villages which are where you site water above 1,000 feet. So you can also see from this particular figure that the rain-fed farmers, the people who are mostly not really able to dig borewells, have been gradually being pushed out of agriculture. And since there is an opportunity which a city has posed, there is not a livelihood situation as such, but there is definitely a question or a dilemma that sustainability has been posing. So on the one hand, you have livelihoods, and on the other, you have a question of sustainability in terms of the environment. So the first question which I would like to pose here is, how do we ensure food security, sustain livelihoods, but at the same time, how do we keep our natural resources, in this particular case, water consumption, sustainable? So if I just take a different perspective and start from the environmental angle, so something which we did together along with Somajit Bar and Shoaib Chakravarti, my collaborators, during COVID-19 lockdown. So we were quite intrigued by several of our environmentalist friends making the claim that environment has actually improved. I'm sure all of you must have come across news items in popular media as to air quality getting improved, water getting cleaner, rivers are getting back to their pristine setting, etc., in newspapers and popular media. So this actually intrigued us and kind of concerned us. So in fact, if you look at some of these popular news reports, which I have just put up on the slides, there were stories of water getting cleaned in Bangalore, or a part of Himalayas getting visible from Jalandhar, and so on. In fact, there were also scientific studies which were quickly made after the lockdown, which found positive impact on air quality in cities like Delhi and so on. So, in fact, when we look at the data, so this is not really incorrect, because it was only natural that when vehicular transportation is suspended and industrial activities is stopped, there would definitely be a dip in air pollution and improvement of air quality. And in spite of the season being good for air generally, lockdown did have a positive impact on air quality as such. So here I am just showing the impact on air quality only, because that's the only thing for which data was quickly available. But this is only a part of the story. So if you just look at the impact that COVID-19 had on the economy and livelihoods, so I saw that there was a panel yesterday on COVID precisely, and there was also presentations on how the economy and people's livelihoods were affected. So I won't go into the details of it, but then just some broad numbers. There was massive economic slowdown, which all of us know. There was a sudden rise in unemployment in the first quarter. But if you look at the details of who was affected by the change by the sudden developments and why, so I would pose a couple of arguments here. So one, I mean, as we all know, it was the urban poor, migrant laborers, and agriculturists who were affected. Here, the challenge which I am posing is one of people's livelihoods being affected, inequities being exacerbated. But on the other hand, if you are an environmentalist, you would basically look at it as something which has, in quotes, improved the situation. So we used this opportunity also to look at some of the data which was available nationally. We found from literature, I mean, for instance, Cancel and Piketty made this very startling claim in the Review of Income and Wealth paper that 22% of income share in India is held by the richest 1%. I mean, which goes back to what the previous speaker was basically talking about, towards the end. And our own computation from the IHDS data set found that India has a relatively high income-based Gini coefficient of 0.55. And what we would argue here is that when we looked at the consumption pattern, so we divided the consumption basket into food, non-food, and luxury categories. And then we found that among the affluent, the top income decile spends up to 8.2 times than the bottom decile on luxury goods. And these are the ones which have the most environmental footprint. So it is not just unsustainable in terms of the reach that you can make in terms of consumption. So it is also unsustainable in the kind of impact that it might have on reaching climate goals individually, nationally, and so on. So in fact, so when we look at this, again, another dilemma or a trade-off here, we see that the consumption of the poor and the middle-income households is at the subsistence or on essentials, but the huge environmental impact is coming from the affluent. So I would agree with the last point which was made by Dr. Balachandra that unchecked growth or consumption is actually not feasible. I mean, all of us are now well aware of the ecological limits that unchecked growth poses. And large inequalities is also not desirable as a normative position when we look at the issue of development and also how development should happen in future. So I'm just trying to come back from this quick presentation of empirical material to the point which I was trying to make in the beginning. So which is that the way we look at development process, the way we look at whether millets are needed for good for the environment or whether people's preference for rice, should we encourage that to continue. So these are all based on values and positions that the researchers, the policymakers, and the people on the ground hold and also articulate and effect in their projects and programs. So efficiency as a normative paradigm or a normative position might lead to continuation of the kind of policies that we see now. But on the other hand, if we emphasize on equity and fairness, you should think of redistribution, pro-poor policies, and so on. Sustainability would involve anything from encouraging people to change their behavior to the shift from more water-intensive crops to, say, millets and such crops for consumption due to health reasons or due to sustainability concerns. So I'm not arguing that these are happening. This can happen as a trade-off. This can possibly happen simultaneously. But then the point which I'm trying to make is that normative positions really matter in development. So my last point, so if this is the kind of premise that we are working on, so what could be the possible ways forward? So if I look at the current theoretical literature and also the way people have been putting forward policies and also programs, not just governments, but also all the small grassroots initiatives which are happening. So we could think of two broad paradigms which are emerging. So one is the kind of green growth paradigm, so which would still continue growth, but then it will have a green color to it. So for me, it appears to be an oxymoron. I'm not really sure how with the current consumption patterns, unless inequality and the social groups which have to be targeted are targeted. I don't know how green growth is actually going to be possible. So equity is a core concern there. The second idea, which has gained prominence in development circles in the last few years, is the idea of degrowth. So in fact, there was a proliferation of literature and also argument. If you're on social media, on Twitter, degrowth is kind of the word these days, which is being discussed and debated. So in the Indian setting, degrowth, which is a voluntary transition from a high consumption lifestyle to scaling down, might be too idealistic to think of. Moving forward, so what I would just propose, I mean, so this is open for discussion, would be that maybe we could think of something like degrowth for the rich and growth for the poor for a setting like India or similar countries. So in as far as research is concerned, since this is also a colloquium where several young researchers are attending, so I initially started my presentation by looking at this dilemma also in terms of the goals that we are supposed to achieve in by 2030. So we need more evidence on the interactions between different SDGs. So there are several macro level research which is happening on SDG interactions, but there have been very little, or at least articulated in this way, as to how, for instance, SDG 6 is interacting or conflicting with the goals of SDG 2. One is on agriculture productivity and the other is on water management. I mean, for anybody who has been to villages or anybody who has worked on the agrarian setting, this poses a clear dilemma. There has also been studies and also field observations which tells you that in spite of putting in efficient water management systems, so people might actually cultivate more of the same crop rather than water being used efficiently. So it's a real trade-off. So this is not a conceptual thing. This is actual things which are happening on the ground. The other final word which I want to conclude this presentation would be with, so what are the implications for policy and practice? So there are several alternative small experiments which are happening in the villages of India. So which are documented, some which are undocumented, but then these are small changes. So although small changes can add to big changes, there is at some point we need to think of systemic changes in terms of proactive policies and also actual targeting of the systems and people involved to be able to make this movement forward in terms of looking at equity and sustainability together, and then how to develop a much more integrated vision for future. So I would stop at that point in terms of my thoughts on development dilemma and the way I see it, and from my experience where I come from. So I would be happy to discuss and take questions. Thank you.
Thanks a lot, Dr. Bejoy. It was again a very thought-provoking talk. Now we do have some time with us, and it would be nice if we can take some. I see that some questions or points have been discussed already in the chat box. If we have something more, I think we can open it up for some questioning before we.
Professor Anand, I think there are already a few questions in the chat box which you can ask.
Okay.
Yeah.
So there was a question from Professor Shailendra to, I think it was addressed to Professor Srijit Mishra, has also answered it. Okay. So the question was, when you say top down is essential, it was contradictory. How exactly farmers were involved in terms of their needs and views about millets? Their own consumption matters. Larger question is how such projects succeed when the larger political economy is top down. Professor Mishra, would you like to elaborate? Its answer is there, but would you like to speak something on that?
Yeah, I think I have partially answered it there. Yeah. So yeah, it's a very good question. The structure, any structure, whether we are in a democratic structure or we are in an authoritarian or any other structure, the decision, any policy decision has to be taken by the executive, whether it is elected executive, whether it is selected executive, whether it is a hereditary executive, whoever, they have to take the decision. So that is, you may call it a necessary evil or a design structure where policy decisions have to be top down. Even within the family also, someone has to take a decision, even if all family members sit and discuss. So this once a decision, but then how do we make it top down? When every structure is top down, how does one make it bottom up? So let me tell you, see, this was a very small program. The budget was to begin with. Now, of course, it has gone much bigger. It has become much bigger. So to begin it was about 70 crores for 5 years. That means about 12, 13 crore per year. And that too spread across 30 blocks to begin with. So it was a much bigger program. And then we tried to bring in participants and players across stakeholders. Like I said, that we had perhaps some champions in the government, in the decision-making positions. We also had number of engagements with civil society groups, and in turn also many times perhaps with farmers, not only within Odisha, but also some farmers from outside Odisha or people working with farmers from outside Odisha. They came to the initial consultation and subsequent consultation leading to the policy design. So the engagement, I think I briefly mentioned about, it would be a very long, take me long to tell that how this project has succeeded or so far succeeded, as I would say. It's a challenge. I would say such projects, it's a challenge to get them into success. It has been possible because of our constant engagement with bottom and top structure. I'll give one example. One top-down structure, which perhaps all of us know, is that because of certain problems in 60s and 70s, we got into this green revolution, which is an input-intensive cultivation, and the inputs are linked with subsidy. So fertilizer, electricity, and everything. And as an aside, maybe I may say that Punjab should not be growing paddy. I'll come back to that a bit later because of the water depletion and everything that we are talking about. Given this, if I bring in millets or millets should come into a program, agriculture program in any state, then the whole system will start thinking, okay, how do we make millets production like paddy production? Through various kinds of incentive structure, it would be input intensive. We will put fertilizers, we will put pesticides, and we will increase the yields. We will give seeds which are of good varieties which are hybrids, and they will give you certain yield. And then because of these inputs, we can provide incentives. Now, what we were trying to do, we were not only trying to bring in millets, we were trying to bring in millets, but we were also trying to champion certain traditional knowledge systems, indigenous varieties, but bring in science at the same time, bring in certain agronomic practices. Like if I do certain kind of spacing between two saplings, then my yield can grow up. If I do certain kinds of water management structures, my yield can go up. So there were small practices which were happening maybe in their community, perhaps some time ago, or in neighboring community, maybe in Andhra, maybe from Tamil Nadu, where our partners were there. So we had documented that knowledge and we thought we should try. So the farmers actually listen to you. They will also see, observe. There are experiences from other parts. Like I remember an experiment in Andhra Pradesh long back. So there are many such experiments. So there is this lady farmer. That was the initial days of SERP, Society for Elimination of Rural Poverty. This lady came from a saving thrift kind of a thinking, and then a group they decided they should reduce costs. I'm summarizing the big story in a very brief way. And then after that whole experiment, she comes back home, challenges her husband that I should go for this alternative cultivation practices. Husband is then they have a quarrel, and then they decide that half of the plot this lady will produce in the alternative way, half of the plot the husband will do in another way. And then at the end of the season, what they see, yields are more or less similar, costs are much high with input intensive. And second year, the village shifts. Second season, they shift to their entire land, not only this one plot. By third season, the entire village shifts. So what I'm saying, that farmers are also scientists. They also observe. So there was this challenge to us, like how do we provide space for democracy, space for freedom, while we are bringing in a program which is top down. So we provided space. There were challenges. As I said, we have to engage with village extension officials for the same reason which Professor Sailendra has pointed out. It has been a challenge. I won't say that we have been always successful in trying to or our implementation at the ground level has always given that space to democracy. There might have been certain places where it has not. But people, when you impose it, what people will do, people will not come into your program. They may try to observe it from outside. Today, I can say that there are many farms, many plots, which are actually taken up agronomic practices, where our workers or our program people, they are not there. They might have gone and seen that someone is doing in the neighboring village, or because their daughter or son is married in that village, they did this practice. So the agronomic practices that was introduced 4 years ago has spread beyond perhaps officially expanded areas. And procurement also might have helped, because that gives a price premium, or gives a price. Otherwise, it was being sold in 5 rupees, 10 rupees, 15 rupees. Today, you get per kg 30 rupees. So anyway, there are a lot of structures, but I think one unique aspect of this program is perhaps the institutional architecture, which has this structure of having government, civil society, and academia at the state level. At the district, have the civil society group, which is the program secretariat, but we also have a local facilitating agency. Then we go down to the village level. We have the facilitating agency. We have the farmers. We have the extension workers. So I think at various levels, this multiple engagements happen. And what seed to use, if you want to bring in participatory varietal trials, we do an experiment in that village or neighboring village, where the farmers come see not only about yield, but about quality, about various things. So it's an ongoing experiment. It has an ongoing challenge, and a lot of research can happen there from science, from these questions, from multiple questions. And yeah, I think it's a challenge, and we have the program has so far been successful in addressing some of it, I can say. I won't definitely, I agree with Professor Sailendra's proposition that it is not a smooth sailing.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thanks a lot, sir, for your elaborate response.
Thank you very much.
We have another question from Dr. Richa Agarwal. Sir, we have to understand that we cannot always depend on another pandemic to improve the water and air quality. According to government statistics, average annual per capita water availability may be down from 1.3 to 1.1 million liter in year 2025 and 2050. I think this is for Dr. Bejoy.
Yeah, so that's for me. So in fact, so I'm in complete agreement with you. So this is precisely the point which I was trying to make, which so maybe didn't completely come through. So the argument which I am trying to make is that the kind of improvement that we saw in air quality and water quality was not something which was planned. So the pandemic did improve water quality. So the quick response from people who were worried about environment and environmentalists was that, oh, there has been a environmental improvement because of the pandemic. But then that has come at the cost of huge human suffering. So definitely we cannot be depending on pandemics or unforeseen sudden tragic circumstances to be working on the environment. So we should have planned strategies towards environmental protection and also sustainable approaches as we move forward. So it should be planned and it should be phased. So that is one point. The second point is that this should also address the question of equity that I presented. So we have a situation where if we want to really look at sustainability and if we want to tackle the issues of the environment, so we need to look not just at the visible improvements in air or water. We also need to look at the consumption patterns that the rich, the higher income deciles are engaged in. So it is a question not just of taking forward from visible cues that we have. So it is also a question of whom to target and then how to move forward with respect to phased out long-term strategies. So we can't depend on sudden happenings which are tragic in other ways like pandemic to be able to address situations of the challenges that environmental issues are posing. So that was my point. So I'm on board and fully in agreement with you on that. I hope
okay,
this explanation has clarified.
Yes.
Yeah, we have a question, I think, to Professor Patil, which he has answered, but it will be nice if he elaborate. Professor Patil, my question is, when the entire economic and social system in the country is promote consumerism, how can you give a different direction? Market is armed with resource, technology, and lobby power. They can decipher what is in your mind. In such a situation, what will you suggest to a common man in the government? You have put an answer, Dr. Patil, but would you like to?
Yeah. Now I will give the answers in a slightly different way. I think when I started my energy research career in 1987 with Professor Amolya Reddy, I think we published a couple of articles in Economic and Political Weekly on why energy efficiency, renewable energy should be integrated into larger energy planning exercises. I think after reading those articles, everyone, I think almost within the government sector, energy sector, even in academics, they started questioning our kind of propositions. They kind of called our group as villains of development. They are kind of agents of some foreign countries. How energy efficiency and renewable energy can solve our problem. In other words, when you do research continuously on some of these non-conventional areas, which are typically not so popular, maybe difficult to get placement, but still, if we produce more and more evidence of such things, at some stage, everyone has to listen. I think my argument is the problem is not small, the challenge is big, but we need to continuously produce newer and new evidence why consumption should be addressed, not the the typical end of pipe solutions. I think that research and continuous pressure, as even Professor Bejoy said, a mix of academic activism and advocacy. I think that's what even Professor Mishra also said is very, very critical. Rather than waiting for 20 years to initiate actions, I think we should speed up. That's the kind of underlying proposition what I had. Thank you.
Yeah. Any other questions? Okay. I would like to, on behalf of IRMA and all of us present, I would like to thank all the three panelists for very, very enlightening talks. It made us think in three different avenues. Within 1.5 hours, we were made to think along three different. For instance, we started with Professor Srijit Mishra who sort of thought aloud with all of us about the efficacy of a top-down versus a bottom-up approach. I'll tell you that in IRMA, when I joined, the top-down word was a bad word. And we always used to think anything which is bottom-up is good, anything which is top-down is bad. But these talks make us kind of recalibrate our position and think that what is practical, and it should be an optimal mix, the golden mean, whatever you call, of the two. And it's easier said than done, but it's something which should be achieved. Then Dr. Patil said about the unburdened consumption, unfettered consumption that's really ruining our sustainable development. It's taking it for a toss. And what he said should make us think about, even I was thinking, what did I do? I bought another laptop, I bought this, I bought that. What am I doing? Was what I was thinking subconsciously as he was speaking. And this was further emphasized, taken forward by Dr. Bejoy, when he actually said that there is a need possibly in some sectors for a degrowth rather than a growth, which again is a very thought-provoking statement, needs to be internalized, needs to be processed further. What I would add after all of this is, yes, and I would go back to the first presentation in which Professor Mishra touched upon where do academicians stand here. And I think somebody asked him also about the role of an academic. And that is, what do we do in an action research? What is the role of an academic? Possibly, I think our training possibly enables us to look beyond just the here and now. It enables us to have a broader view of things and possibly communicate with different stakeholders in as objective a manner as possible. Notwithstanding some of the, as Dr. Bejoy said, there are some normative aspects to development as well. But today, I am thinking aloud that for institutions like ours, when we think that we should do more research and so on, I respect that. But today, what kind of research we do, what impact that research has, and what difference does it make to the world is as important than just saying that it should go in this journal, it should go in that journal, and so on. I think that we should be qualitative as much as we are quantitatively concerned about our research. With these words, I thank our panelists wholeheartedly from all of us at IRMA and call it a day. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I thank all the participants for staying through this talk, and I would just obviously thank our three panelists along with Professor Anand Venkatesh, so basically who gave time. And I know this topic of dilemma in development would be best addressed by the panel. So that's how I approached all of you, and I am grateful to all of you for accepting this invitation with such a short notice. And for the participants, at 6 o'clock, we'll have a talk by Dr. Sarthak Gaurav on the topic skin in the game. So I invite all of you to attend that at 6 o'clock. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.